Hello, and welcome to yet another edition of Through a Therapist's Eyes. This is October the 27th, 2022. We have in store for you the month in review. I'm excited about this episode because for a few reasons. So we got Mr. Neil, who's usually behind the scenes in front of the camera. How you doing, sir?
Oh, I'm making it.
Fantastic. We've got Adam Cloninger, who is hanging with us. You know him from being the co-host for how long, man?
It's been a while now. I really don't know.
Pushing months, right? Or we had a year?
No, I think it's been. I think it might be more than a year, hasn't it?
Maybe. Is it that long? I'd be shocked, man. As you get older, stuff goes
been a
so
while.
fast. Right, John? When things get older, things get so fast.
Yes.
He says,
Very tough.
in a word.
Turn around, and it's gone.
Gone.
It's gone.
It scares me because it's supposed to get worse. Anyway, we have...
And it will.
Yeah.
It'll get worse for you.
Oh, my God. And then we have John Pope, who is with us. He is a therapist that is on our panel. So the month in review, y'all, is a new concept in the life and journey of Through a Therapist's Eyes. So what's going to happen is we have every month, the last week of the month, we're going to have typically just Neil, me, and Adam hanging out, kind of really talking about all of the topics that we covered in a month's time. So I have a sneaking suspicion this might end up being one of the shows that get most views and looked at because you really do get kind of coverage on where we landed. That's a segment for each week, like where we landed on the show topics that we had this week. So I'm really excited about this content. And I think it'll be a fun conversation because we know each other and so I think we'll have fun kind of covering these things with you, and it'll be a lot of kind of concise information about all of the topics. So I think that's a pretty neat. This particular last week of the month will be a pretty neat deal. So, but this is a little different because you're hanging with us, John.
Yes.
He looks really excited.
I know, right?
Oh, I'm excited.
Do we need to? You need coffee or
Yeah. Have a flat affect, don't I?
a little bit? That's a clinical term.
Yes.
Flat affect.
Well, guess what I do?
What the hell does that mean? A flat affect.
I'm smiling.
Okay.
Yeah, that's good.
I say that because I did get feedback that, we use. I mean, it's funny when us clinicians are hanging out, right? Like, oh my gosh, it is just like EFT. What is that? And acronyms, clinical terms, banter of like people. They can't understand therapists when we talk about stuff, dude.
Yeah.
So we got to be careful about that. I was just giving you a hard time, but back to
I'm like a wall.
What's that?
I'm like a wall.
That's an affect. Affect is your mood.
Right.
It's a word that we use that describes, your affect, your clinical presentation of your emotions and mood and presentation. So you're like a wall. Are you feeling like a wall today?
Not really.
Okay.
I'm just
Keep
teasing.
talking, Chris.
Then get a funner
Maybe
affect.
he will.
Indeed. So that is the introduction of what's going on. I didn't finish because John is with us this week, just because he wasn't able. We're getting our schedules together and our routines down, and so I think he had clinical hours that
I did.
Yeah. So I really wanted to pull him in this week for the month in review to really get your thoughts, man, because we had some interaction in the hallway just talking through the weeks, and I wanted to get your take on the topics that we had. So thank you for showing up tonight for this, The Boys Month in Review.
I'm glad to be here.
Yep, cool. So this is the month in review, but still where you get insights in your home and in your car, but not to deliver therapy services in any way. Got the book out, Rediscovering Emotions and Becoming Your Best Self. I need to be starting to pop Neil. The second book's coming out. Kind of not immediately soon. But
I should have been holding the book when he's talking about this. I could have been.
You could have.
Model.
That's
Need a
the
model?
benefit of the extra people. We can have Vannas.
Yeah.
You're not quite the best model, though, man. I got to be honest.
Maybe not for you.
I wondered how he was going to respond to that. We are switching, kind of, although maybe adding to our Facebook Live component of the podcast. So be looking for that. We're really kind of thinking a lot about YouTube. If you check out the YouTube channel, Neil's done some really cool things, popping out some graphics, popping in a preview of something that happened in the show before we get to the show. It's pretty cool stuff. I really appreciate, Neil, what you've been doing with it. You can hit the subscribe button is very important because you get the channel in your little lineup or whatever, like of YouTube TV basically, and then you hit the little bell and you get an alarm every time we are on there live. So pretty cool things happening on YouTube. 5 stars on Apple review, never 4. That would be wrong. No, seriously. Reviews really help us out. If you write things on the reviews, that even helps out a whole lot more on Apple, Spotify as well. Contact at throughitherapisteyes.com. And finally, check out our website, not MetPsych, throughitherapisteyes.com. So, this is the human emotional experience, the month in review. Let's figure this thing out together, is what I like to say. So, Neil, what'd you think, man? Good month, weird month? I mean, introducing the panel, like this is kind of different for us, isn't it?
It's been it was an interesting change on the technology side. There's a lot more on lot of difference on the back end. So
your brain like frying.
Yeah, like I told Adam, I was like, I have to pay more attention because we've changed the video format instead of split screen because there's more people. I have to toggle back and forth, so I actually have to be present in the show. I can't get distracted by an email or a text or look up something, because I've done that where I would look up something while you're talking, but I have potential because if it's switching from one side to the next, I'm trying to toggle. So that's why it's always so weird. But yeah, it's been interesting. It's been fun getting the different viewpoints, having 3 different opinions versus just one or 2.
Yeah.
It's been fun. And I like we've talked about the age difference going from Victoria all the way up to John. It's been very, very interesting.
Well, thank you.
John, just go with the age jokes. You're going to get a lot of them,
I
man.
know.
You're going to get a lot of them.
Hey, she's the other bookend. You got to think of it that way.
That's right.
It is. It's a bookend. It's
Yeah.
a good bookend. But yeah, it's funny for me too, different because my show prep, like, I like to put a lot of information out. Part of what we want to do is disseminate, information. But I've found, it's interesting because I'll have all this information I've thought about and, really prepped and whatever. And then you got John's view on something and Kasie and Victoria start talking. I have a thought and we're all like clinically minded in the topic, so that I've looked sometimes down at my prep and it's like, I think one week I basically abandoned 3/4 of the some of the stuff. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and with Kasie and John, they know a lot and they elaborate on a lot of stuff.
Which
and
is great.
So it's fantastic, but it's definitely like you don't have that layman like, someone like me or Adam being like, oh, that's cool. I don't know what to do with it. It's like they're
Say what?
Kasie and John are like, oh yeah, by the way, back in 1982, this one study from this one. I'm like, it's really cool because it's so much good information, and it's just I'm soaking it in too. But it is a different dynamic now.
Yeah.
So-
And I, before the mics came on, I was telling John. Well, the mics were on, right, when we were talking about affect.
Right.
Yeah, we have to be careful about that, John. We it's crazy, people just listening to a therapist conversation. Can you imagine if they really heard our real conversations, like behind the scenes?
Oh my goodness.
That'd be scary, wouldn't it?
Yeah, it definitely would be.
It's a different perspective.
I go home and I talk to my wife like,
Right.
well, Joy, you have a flat affect.
Oh no, you do not
No,
do
I
that to
don't.
her, do you?
I don't.
Oh my goodness, my wife would.
You're
throat punch-
decompensating.
Yeah.
Now, I'd get crowned for that.
Lisa would throat punch me if
Yeah,
I tried
yeah.
to do that. She would not tolerate. What would she do, Adam? Can you imagine Lisa?
I think she would probably hear flat and then forget what you said after that. She'd be like, you said I had a flat what?
Actually, you're on point.
Chris would be like, no, wait a minute.
That's not what I meant.
That's not what I said.
It's not at all. So, it's been fun, though, Neil. I appreciate that, the differences that we're playing around with and trying to get geared in. So I do have a current event that I want to pop off onto, and then we'll get into the segments of what the shows were, which, by the way, we had the panel introduction, and then we had the foundation of marriage that we talked about, which was cool. We have episode 11. And I like, I've told John and a lot of my clients actually listen to 11 or 101 and episode 201. If you do that, like our clients have a massively cool understanding of emotion-focused therapy and what the ground level is of close attachments. It's that, it's really cool that we have that, and I've actually done that. And then we had emotions, how they can drive us day to day, and then John, you and I talked about religious trauma. So
Right.
those were the shows that we had this week. So we're gonna also get used to having a segment, and I don't know if you've thought about this at all, but I want a little bit of a segment that we'll develop a norm with you, Adam.
Yep, I know.
Right? Oh, you're kind of prepared for that. I
Yeah,
already told you.
I kind of figured that was coming. So
We gotta get
I
a
don't have an
name.
idea yet. So we'll think of something.
And I actually thought about what it is Adam. I'm going to ask him his favorite show or most interesting show of the month, right? And I thought about Neil actually asking you and Adam to debate and come to a conclusion on which is the most interesting social. I think that we'll experiment with that. So
Well,
you guys can get into a
along
battle.
those same lines, I want to mention this. Now, my girlfriend, she's listened to the Foundation of Marriage. That's the only episode she's listened to since she changed format, and she said that's by far the best episode I've seen.
Oh, for real?
Yeah. I mean, that means I wasn't in it, and she said it's the best one, but
That's
still.
not what she meant. I
still.
know that.
If she's digging for marriage, she's doing it wrong.
Yeah, right.
She don't have to dig.
Oh, what?
Yeah, she don't have to dig.
Very cool.
I'm hers, definitely.
That's cool, man.
Yeah.
That's cool. So we'll get into that, and I think we'll move to that next. But here's my current event, and the three of you can chime in as you want to, or say nothing totally, because I'm gonna sound off for a minute. And the current event is here. We're here in North Carolina, and we've got political season going crazy, and we got the election coming up, and we have some ads. My first experience in listening to these ads about Sherry Beasley was just like, oh God, here's that ad again. Oh God, here's that ad again. I mean, it has flooded, as I'm sure you all are experiencing all throughout the country, all the different states in our union are going through some of this stuff, which is almost like comical sometimes. But
Political trauma.
it is. We need to do a show, right?
On political trauma.
You know
Yeah.
what? That we got a month coming up, and the election will be in November. Stay tuned. I could see that happening. You want to prep that show?
I'll think about it. Okay.
Make sure you use that. What's it called? They call it a wrap-up smear. Is it the correct term I'm thinking of?
What?
Where they tell something about a political opponent that has no basis, and then they'll call the newspaper or the CNN and say, hey, so and so, we heard.
Fact checking.
We can't tell you who heard it from. We heard they did this, and then on the background they'll say, "Hey, we heard from dependable source that so and so did this," and then everybody hears it, and then there's no basis on it. But since they heard it on CNN or whatever,
must be true.
They must be
Be
true.
true. One of the things, and the reason why I would say political trauma as in religious trauma,
Yep.
is the sense that people, as we become more secularized in our society, they have to have something to believe in. And so you get people that, let's say, become true believers, whether it's ultra right or ultra left. And
Oh,
so
yeah.
there's that religion aspect to it.
You know what?
Religious-
I'm gonna cut you off because we are gonna do that show. We'll do that
Okay.
in November. I think that is a totally cool mental health thing to look at in way of the cultural divide that we've had. That is a huge mental.
Should you do it in
health
November
issue.
or maybe do it toward the end of
Do
November?
it as a Thanksgiving.
Oh, dear God.
Because that's
do
where
it the
people
end of
get in
November after
arguments.
after we're recovering from the goofy nonsense of the election cycle.
Because people won't talk to each other.
I think the first episode in
absolutely
December.
not. What's that?
First episode in December when y'all should do it.
Okay, yeah, I'm gonna play around with that. So we just foreshadowed you. You'll know one of the show topics coming up.
Finally,
so-
we'll get foreshadowing not a week before or 2 days before.
Unless Chris procrastinates, and then
What he's referring to is I frustrate these guys doing my show prep, like sort of, I mean, I'm not late. I'm on time perfectly in my head. Anyway, let me sound off before we get too far. So these ads that go in North Carolina are about a very serious topic. And what the ads have been doing is portraying her in a way where she is weak on crime, right? That's what they'll level with her, and it has a lot to do with sex offenders. And the sex offender world that we have really launched into has a lot to do with pornography and online engagement and our developing knowledge and understanding of sex addictions and all of this sort of thing. But what is portrayed that I want to really rail on and misspell a serious myth that is out there about this is the way that the ad portrays is that she wants to allow these criminal-minded, evil creatures back on the street, weak on crime, and allowing them to get back onto social media where your kids are on as well. And the reality of it is there are so many people that, and I've had them in my office, I've worked with this issue, that have nothing to do with children. It is the perpetual fear-mongering that you hear with politics. And I just have a platform, and I decided, this is controversial. I'm sure I'm going to piss some people off by kind of talking about this a little bit in the way that I am, but it's completely unnecessary. The reality of it is these men and women, by the way, it's not just dudes that have sex crimes, have all sorts of things that are going on in their individual circumstance and don't necessarily need to be shuffled off into prison for 5 years because they're some perceived to be, a complete pedophile. Now, pedophilia is a thing. It's a real thing, and it's a horrible thing because there's a lot of recidivism in that particular issue. They will reoffend and reoffend and reoffend, and that's the type of sex crime that we did almost exclusively in our culture up until about 10, 15. John, I'd be curious if you
20.
think 20 years
It was
ago.
over 20.
Thank you, Neil.
It's actually more 30.
Yeah.
In the early 90s. The Adam Walsh Act and stuff like that was kind of the big, and I think John Wetterling is another one that basically, that was the big things back then.
Right.
That initiated.
And then you had later was the daycare, the child care scandals that were satanic.
Right. And of course, we know that we've covered on the show before the Roman Catholic circumstances with priests and all. So, but nowadays there's so many other things that are happening with people that because people are dealing with the current present day issues that we don't really have time to totally go into. We'll probably do a whole show on that. But the fear-mongering of this particular issue and demonizing of these folks that get caught into, the pornographic system, which overwhelms a person as being completely just pedophilia, preying on kids and going after them on social media sites that is not correct. That's not the way to portray it, and it's not the way to legally engage in the circumstances. Gonna piss people off with that one, I'm sure. Please feel free to send me an email, and we'll go back and forth on this one a little bit if you're interested. Contact at throughatherapisteyes.com. Nobody has to say anything about this. If you guys got thoughts, I'd be curious. Any thoughts you want to add or share or think?
I don't trust any of the politician commercials or anything.
Yeah, there's a lot of nonsense that gets thrown around for sure.
Well, it does do a level of extremism when they say this, and that may not be what Beasley's obviously not saying, and she's doesn't have a record on that in terms of that type of saying I'm going to let somebody off or have the revolving door. Well, and I think they're playing up on the fears of cashless bail and that sort of thing.
Right. Yeah.
Right, which would be completely separate. But I mean, the reality is, with the studies of the registry, the studies of everything that's happened since it was implemented 30 years ago, it's all false. You look at the recidivism as one of the lowest for offenders. It's one of the lowest out of any type of criminal activity.
Right.
Which they don't realize. Most of the people who actually get caught with it, it's first timers and they're close to the person. Very few are social media random stranger. All of these fears that these politicians do, it's unwarranted and it's not true. And there's been many cases where there's been a lot of pushes for these politicians, and experts have to come in and basically debunk and say, look, these studies you're doing are not accurate. One of the biggest studies was basically like very vague and generalizes that they could have up to 20%, but it wasn't a scientifically proven study. It was all just false. The guy who actually wrote, like, it's been disproved. And so that's the thing where it goes back to fear mongering. It's like, even when you look at, like right now with a lot of the gender stuff, there's a lot of fear mongering on that side saying they do all these horrible things to these kids and this gender affirming stuff.
Grooming.
Right. Yeah. So there's all these things that on both sides, it's a fear mongering political tactic that does nothing good for those that they're serving.
Yeah, it
and that's the
perpetuates the
problem.
myths that are out there about the issue.
And that's where, and I think that's when I started getting into politics, looking at it like 10 years ago, I literally like spent about 2 hours and I'm like, I'm done. Like when you see both sides of it, like, I don't know who's right. They're both exaggerated and it's just horrible. But yeah, in this case, it's so far-fetched. The studies are showing that what Beasley would be doing if she's being softer on those that are of those types of crimes is actually more accurate, more accurate punishment, but you also have to look at, very few states have a tiered sex offender system.
Right.
So someone who statutory rape because they were 18 and the girlfriend was 16 or 15, or someone who basically urinated in public is still an offender versus someone who literally like took advantage of a young kid, so that's part of the issue. So you're bundling a wide range of people into the same thing. Someone who basically got, hit someone at a bar is basically the same guy who would be, that's classifying someone who just hit someone with like assault.
Is it put in, public urination is in the sex offender category nowadays?
Chris is worried now.
I know, right?
But yeah, so that's the hard part about it is there's some states are tiered, a lot of states are not. And so you're grouping everyone together.
Yeah.
Teenagers, your sons, Chris, if your son had a girlfriend or if my son had a girlfriend and they got sent a picture, the girlfriend could be labeled as a producer and they could be labeled as a possessor of.
He's calling as we speak.
So, but that's the reality. And that's why
crazy.
These laws aren't accurate and they need to be addressed. And so someone like, while I probably don't agree with a lot of her other stuff, the fact that she's actually trying to do correct based on the studies of what's going on, that needs to be addressed and needs to be looked at, because there are people who are offenders that the laws are affecting them more than what they were convicted for.
Right.
And so just something to think about.
It's a lot there. And let's get to the month in review. But I just so y'all know in the audience, I did not prep these guys for that. I did not, deal. I just went on a limb because I decided it was
appropriate. Are you going
to do.
Unsubscribes?
Hey, who knows, man? I mean, honestly. But you know what? When it comes to things that I feel like really need to kind of be spoken to, I don't have any problem using this platform to do that as long as we're doing it in a respectful and appropriate and accurate and scientific way, because that's what we do. We work with this stuff, all the time. So let's move to the segment of what was the most interesting show, Neil and Adam's debate. I like the way I'm thinking and setting that up. So we got the panel review. We've got foundations of marriage. We've got emotions day to day, and then we've got the religious trauma. What do you guys think?
So the religious trauma thing, I don't think I've actually heard that yet.
Oh, it was really good.
So that was is that on Spotify?
Of course it was. That might not be released. Did I screw up? I'm getting used to this platform.
Is that on Spotify yet?
Okay, it's not out.
I didn't hear that.
No,
one yet.
that is scheduled for Monday.
Okay.
So,
Well, then neither of you can choose.
So that's not me procrastinating. It's just not out yet. Because
Call it what you want to.
That was my screw up. So we're only supposed to have 3 shows. Did I have all 4? Didn't I? Yeah.
We actually talked about this the other day. Remember we said it wouldn't have the third episode wouldn't be there.
Yeah, we did. Well, but I didn't. I just leave me alone. Just choose one.
So with that in mind, I like the emotions show.
I thought the religious trauma one was really good, but I think the emotion was, because I think I've heard so many marriage stuff being on the show, like EFT again.
He's sick of it.
Oh, by the way, you've done good without me. I noticed that you kept on like telling what acronyms were.
Oh, okay, yeah. Well, I got that
I'm
feedback.
I was like, yeah, he did a good job.
That's
told me-
awesome. Okay, I appreciate that.
Yeah, good job.
Appreciate that. Yeah, it's funny that you say it that way. I hope you're listening, my buddy Adrian, because I got feedback, and that was one of the things he said. Like, look, you said EFT. We don't know what EFT is. So I did all right.
Yeah, you did good.
Evidently, I
Did
still
good.
need to improve, though. Or we need to
Oh,
improve.
definitely.
So you're tired of the EFT stuff because you've heard a lot of it on the show.
No, I just think it's fun because every time I bring it up, my wife hates the terms that are used. The abandonment engulfment, she hates those terms.
Oh, she does?
Oh, she hates the words that they've picked. She's like, those are such negative, horrible words to pick.
So the people who have not seen or know what EFT is, why don't you go ahead and tell them what EFT is now?
Well, emotion-focused therapy. But
Okay, here
you
we
have to
go.
listen to the show, and you'll get
Well, they
it.
might not know. Maybe they haven't seen that. Or
Well,
doesn't-
we'll
don't
review
know.
it a little
Okay.
There's enough shows they'll find enough with EFT in there because it is so important.
Yeah.
It is
Yeah.
about everyone's that foundation of what they're like. Like we've talked about it. You have kind of your characteristics, your personality, but when it comes down to brass tacks, this is what your personality is going to lean towards. Either you're going to be an abandonment or a golfment, and so it is so crucial in understanding how we interact with each other, especially in times of stress. I think that's one of the best things about it that I've gotten from the shows. So, but I do think how emotions, affect your day. People need to understand that. As someone with a teenager, I've seen his emotions through a day, and I've seen him practicing how it dictates what he does. So I think that was a very good show that people need to go back and watch because they need to understand that, how you're being affected by your day and what's going on really changes your perception and how you react to it.
I liked how you took it back to the very basic about the child and hearing the mother's voice and stuff. I liked how you had it that and like going back to that comfort thing. I like that. That was a good way to describe that.
Yeah, I
example.
remember that point, and actually, that was again, I forget the name of the movie. Kasie was right on it, right? The cartoon movie that depicts
Inside Out.
Inside Out, yes. It is a super cool way to understand that.
Were they in the brain or something? I didn't.
They were totally in the kid's experience emotionally in her brain or in her body, basically.
Yeah.
And they're evidently going to do another one with the teenage brain, which honestly I can't wait to see. That is so entertaining.
Has to be more chaotic, I'm sure.
Way. Like the buttons, what do they have? One for sadness, one for anger, one for worry. I think is what the 3 buttons they have for a 5-year-old.
Another one with peanut butter on it. Can tell what it is.
Well, probably so. It just gets pushed randomly, but the teen's gonna have like 15 buttons, man. I mean, they're gonna have to have a lot of characters, right? In the show inside.
I think they're going to be a lot of combined characters because it's like they're angry and they're sad, or
At the
they're
same
happy
time.
and they're like.
Yeah, if you're happy and you're sad. Like,
Well, you talked about that too, though. You talked about the combined emotions
in that show. Yeah. So is that where you landed, Adam, as well?
Mhm. Yep.
'Cause I was sorry, I was responding to my kid called, and I always pick up, but.
Well, he did call it 3 times. So
Well, he called twice. That's why I needed to text him back because I take that seriously. When the kiddos call. So, okay, well, that was an easy debate for you guys then. You both landed on the emotions day to day, huh?
We'll reach out to religious trauma next review.
We'll pull that.
we'll have
pull that.
more shows next time.
I
Well,
just
no,
gotta,
it's
I
still
gotta
be
get
3.
I just
It'll
need to
be
get you a
3.
copy of it so you can listen to it.
Okay.
So that way you know.
Well, it was on Facebook Live, though.
Well,
right?
it'll be eventually.
It is on Facebook Live.
Okay,
if you just
that's
go-
where I heard part of it because I heard y'all you two were talking about it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so I heard part of it, but not all of it.
Again, listening audience, we will get our routines
Okay.
together. So,
Yep.
all right, let's go through the shows a little bit. And John, the first 2 you were not there for, or the last 2. Of course, you were there for the panel one. So I'm really kind of curious. That's kind of why he's here, to see what his view is on some things. And so, as I explained, it's going to be a little bit different this time. But the panel introduction, I think, was the first one that we did. Okay, and to me, I just thought that was really kind of cool to begin a new process and all. I mean, I'm curious what that was like for you, John.
Well, I found it very pleasant. I found it everybody was very engaging and kind to one another. And I don't want to sound like Pollyanna on that, but it was.
Yeah.
I had a good time, and I'm sort of aware of the mic a bit.
Yeah.
And I do tend to go like this.
Yeah, we were making fun of it before
Yeah.
the mics come on.
But But after a while, you get less and less aware of that.
Oh, yeah.
And then you get
Yeah.
into the conversation. And then some of the things, I think, particularly with Kasie and I, we were going back and forth a little bit in terms of some of the thoughts. She's quite
She's
right
sharp.
on point.
She is sharp. Yeah, I told you.
And I was thinking she could do a dissertation on something.
She can. She is a very, very sharp therapist, and the phrase that I do, this is the human emotional experience, and we're figuring this out together. And I tell you, John, it's going to be super cool over the months to come, and hopefully years to come. Honestly, where I feel like we're going to learn so much, the four of us,
Exactly.
like doing this. Because we get so, after you're younger, Victoria being younger, you still getting a lot of trainings and paying attention and doing a lot of
But it's interesting
learning
seeing it from
person.
her eyes.
It's fantastically interesting.
Yeah, because
right?
it's maybe there's a sense that she hadn't been jaded or by life,
Poisoned by life.
poisoned by life. And
Yeah.
no,
I'm just kidding. I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
It'll happen, I know.
I'm kidding.
But I think it's also cool because like she's so entrenched. Like she is like you watch her and you watch her body language, and I feel like she's just like soaking in this in as a sponge, and she's loving it, which is great to see as someone coming up. Like that's really cool to see someone that excited about it, that young, going into your guys' field. So it's cool to see because that's promising that this is someone that in 20 years, what she'll know and how she'll adapt and how she'll grow with her clients is going to be really, really neat to see.
Oh, it's
So
very enthusiastic.
yeah, absolutely. And I just see myself in that. Like it takes me back to when I was, soaking up that information. I mean, I would ask questions and just want to learn and know, and I still do that. Don't get me wrong at all, but that's why I love supervising young clinicians and new clinicians, and why I think the show is fantastic for clinicians kind of as well, and even better now that we have a panel, because there's a lot of stuff that we're throwing around. Yeah, go ahead.
I was teaching a class, and in counseling, it's an intro class into counseling, and they kept pumping me. I don't know, maybe they're just like a lot of students, and they say, well, as long as he keeps talking, he won't make us take a test or something like that. But instead,
Yeah, I'm sure they're thinking
right,
that.
yeah. This
Keep
graduate
talking.
Let him talk. Let him talk.
graduate school, but they wanted to hear about some of the cases that I had worked on, and
It's probably
with
the best
people.
part of the class. Yeah.
Yeah, and it was 2.5 hours, 3 hours later, we were still telling stories, and I'm and listening, and they're kind of writing it down and putting it down enthusiastically.
Well, it's through a therapist's eyes,
You're right.
right?
Exactly.
These are real situations that are, I think people genuinely want to hear and understand. Yeah. So, where did we land? Okay, so with the panel, I think really where we landed was the variety that we have.
Mm-hmm.
I introduced everybody, and we got to know each other, and really the diversity, I think, Neil, that you mentioned, a newer therapist just beginning her career in Victoria, a clinician who's probably on the latter part, but still the first half of her career, and I'm definitely in the second half of my career, and you're kind of towards the more end of your career.
Oh yeah,
Right. He says, oh, yeah.
free at last. No,
Free at
no,
last.
not really.
We had a guy retired. That's what he actually said during the meeting. He said,
I'm a
thinking all week."
retread. I'm not a retired person. I'm a retread.
Yeah. Yeah, but that lends for excellent diversity through our eyes in what we have seen in our travels and the different stages that a clinician is in. So that's where we landed. Let's go to the foundations of marriages. So yeah, Neil, I mean, this is a cool show, I think, in the way that we've covered it over the months, and we're going to continue doing that because it really, to me, John, emotion-focused therapy, I use it in individual therapy as much as I do couples counseling that I do. How people operate in close attachments is what it's all about. And I'll remind you, if you listen to episode 11 or 101 and 201, you will have an excellent understanding, because the first whole half of that show that was me, Victoria, and Kasie really just talking about their views on marriage and the foundations of it and how it operates, right? So I'm curious, John, from your perspective, do you know emotion-focused therapy? Do you use Gottman stuff?
I have. I don't use it very much. I kind of have a different perspective. But,
Wow. See, that's why I wanted you on the show.
You're getting it now.
bummer.
Yeah, I know, right? We're about to.
You're getting it now.
Yeah. Well, you got to understand, I have a theological education, so I view things differently a little bit in terms of from that. But I also I like Gottman. I like what is behind that. I'm more involved in terms of let's say the relational.
Imago?
Pardon?
Imago?
Yeah, Imago. Yeah.
So
And
Imago
being-
therapy is, what's the nutshell? Just the nutshell, John. Can you?
No, I can't say that.
Is it hard to?
It's in the image of. So in other words, Imago means the image.
Okay.
Okay, and so that's a Greek word, but I really think in terms of
Wait, okay. Let me. What I'm saying is, I thought you were saying similar relational base for
Right.
couples counseling, such as in Imago therapy. Is that not what you're saying, or you are saying that?
Well, I am to a certain extent. I'm more involved in terms of being in the image of God.
Okay.
In terms of relationship and seeing how God would see us
Okay.
in that relationship with one another, and so I would say Imago in that way.
Okay. So Imago therapy, for the listening audience, is a type of therapy where you engage in kind of, I think it's kind of relational in the way that they
Yeah,
operate.
it is.
And it's some really neat stuff in how you pick your partner. And I'm not as well versed in it to give much more of a, so I won't try, other than how you pick your partner and how that life experience kind of plays into what you're comfortable with, what you're familiar with. And then Imago therapy looks to break out the different functions of your perception and implicit biasness and stuff like that. So that's the nutshell. But go on further. I think I interrupted you then.
No, that's fine. I just I when I work with couples, and I would say I would look in terms of the systems that are in.
Well, that's social work, systems theory. Yeah.
Systems theory. Yeah. I mean, we did a lot of Don Jackson MRI. Oh gosh, what? I can't think of his name, but he did the cybernetics.
I don't know.
Yeah. But one of the things in terms of systems is what.
Is
I'm
it
sorry.
RL?
Mental Research Institute.
I'm thinking of a different thing.
All right.
Sorry.
MRI, like being in a big X-ray machine.
No, I was thinking of something else.
Yeah.
There we go with the acronyms, right?
Okay. Sorry about that. But
So what would you use the relational aspect when you're sitting down with couples, and the foundations there of what you're after, what
how much do couples listen and react and think of how I can serve you and meet your needs, and also the other person reciprocating. And so it's not, you have to show attention to me as much as how I can serve you and how I can be in relationship with you.
Okay.
And so it's a give and take.
My wife and I just had this conversation about schools and stuff, and how a lot of it seems like it's more about me and like what's going on with me versus that outward, like, how do I help someone else, or and it's this weird kind of like, I feel like there's too much of what about me and trying to fix me. And I'm more with you, John, that I think in a relationship, it's more about how do I serve her? What can I do to benefit my significant other? Yeah. And I think that's missing in today's society, is that key piece of it.
Well, there's the self-centeredness which keeps you from being able to actually have you be aware of what it is to be in a relationship or to walk in another person's shoes. I think that if you're so self-centered, you can't think. You're so circumscribed by that you're not open to another person trying to share with you their lives, and so you can feel very isolated if it's always about you.
So I would be intrigued to have a show about this, because this is a little bit different from the EFT side. I would love to see John lead it, just to get that take on it, because I feel like when you talk about EFT, you do cover the idea, oh, they're like this, so I have to be understanding of it. So there is an awareness of the other person, but I think there is still about a lot of it is, here's who I am and how do I adjust or work with myself versus how do I really want to serve the other person. So I'm intrigued to see like what the panel would say about this type of because I know Casey's big EFT too, and stuff like that. So I'd be intrigued to see like if John lead it, like what kind of what that conversation would look like.
Yeah, indeed.
Well, let me get, it's not marriage, but it's meeting Mother Teresa, for example. And I had Mother Teresa came to Subic Bay in the Philippines.
Like for real, you met her?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh yeah.
You met Mother Teresa?
Yeah.
That's cool.
My
Dude.
wife. Okay. Yeah. Okay. This is honest truth.
Okay.
We get invited to the priest house after the service that Mother Teresa led. She came to start a mission of charity, the Missionaries of Charity in Subic Bay. This was 1987, and she comes and she talks, and then we go to the house, and she sits down at a couch, and my wife gets to sit next to her. She talks to my wife.
Joey got to hang out with
Right.
Mother Teresa also.
Yeah, a Marine Sergeant Bob Byer says, Mother Teresa, can I get you some tea? And she says, no, I would like to serve you first.
Right. Okay.
Okay. Now, the point is, she's serving other people.
Right.
And Bob Byer is serving other people.
Right.
And so that's that mutual sense in marriage that you do that. So,
Wow. Yeah. So you're talking. So where you land almost to a certain extent is the foundation of marriage. John Pope would say is
Pope
service.
John. Yes.
Oh, Pope John. Indeed. Pope John.
Uh-huh.
John Pope, the therapist, would say the foundation of marriage is in essence service
Service to one another.
to one another.
And so that's why when you get this false thing, it says, well, the man is the head of a household. Misunderstanding entirely. It's all about, from Ephesians, it's serving one another. And so the guy doesn't say, you've got to do this for me. And the gal doesn't say, you have to sit at my beck and call. Instead, what happens is you serve each other.
Right.
And you anticipate that. And that increases the communication. And so feelings don't get hurt as much. It's not a perfect world. You still have arguments.
Yeah.
And-
Yeah. On the show I've shared, and I really, John, I was just sort of, it was foundational in the way that I see things when I came across Gottman's emotion-focused therapy stuff, so much so that I'll use it, as I said, in individual counseling, because previous to that, I was really looking at, like, what are the patterns that are in place? What are people doing, to perpetuate a cycle that they're in? But until Gottman's stuff, I wasn't pinpointing what exactly patterns and cycles occur. And I think the abandonment and the engulfment cycle pinpoints what those very, very common patterns are and the terror that it evokes.
Right.
So to me, it's really like it's very much on point. Sounds like they go together. I mean, do you have a problem with Gottman stuff? Or
No.
It's not? Yeah, right.
Absolutely
it goes
not.
together a lot with what it is that you're kind of talking about, I think.
Right.
Yeah, yeah. So one of the things that I didn't get to when we did that particular episode that I think is important, that I get questions about all the time, is can't you be both, right? So you got the abandonment side, you got the engulfment side, and can you be both? And I just don't think that you are. Are you familiar with Gottman stuff?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I don't think that you can land when you get into an elevated triggered state. You land on the side that you most commonly operate with when you're in a fear or fight stance, right? And so we do have both characteristics, but when it gets to it, when the shit hits the fan, you very much then move to either the engulfment side or the abandonment side. And I'm surprised that a lot of times people have a hard time understanding sort of even which side they have tendencies towards. So does that make any sense to you?
Yes, it does. Now, let me ask you this, and this is just clarification.
Yep.
But if you're a pursuer, what happens in that with that couple is that there will be a distancing. Is
right.
that
Absolutely.
okay?
Absolutely.
And go back and forth, back and forth.
And it doesn't matter who goes first. If you're the distancer, then the abandonment person is going to jump at you and pursue. Or if you start pursuing hard, then the distancer is going to, back away and, create their space and put up the walls and that sort of thing.
About learners stuff, the dance of anger, the dance of
Oh, yeah.
intimacy,
Right.
and all that. Again, the dance that's
Right.
going on. So Gottman has that dance.
Absolutely.
too. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's what I find, from theoretical basis. I find that things match up. These thought leaders
There's
on things.
parallels.
There are very much parallels with the ideologies or perspectives that kind of really match. Adam, I'm wondering what your theoretical view is on the emotion relational. Are you with us?
I'm with you. Yeah, I'm with you.
Are you abandonment or an engulfment?
Oh, he's asking you directly, putting you on the spot.
I couldn't tell you.
What do you mean you couldn't tell me?
I couldn't tell you.
Are you freaking kidding me?
I wouldn't think I'm abandonment. I mean, I don't think I have walls either. So,
We'll talk later.
It does say either or in that. It gives you that indication or that sense that it's abandonment or engulfment.
Well, this is what we didn't get to cover on the show, and it really kind of is. I have worked with this a lot, and I find that people very much go to their go-to, when. And so, Adam, you don't have to answer.
No,
directly
I'm fine.
like
I don't.
But when
Ask
you,
Julie.
I was gonna say that. I was like, Julie, comment on Facebook.
I'm sure she's typing
probably,
right now.
Yeah, she's probably typing.
Because honestly, Adam, what you can think about is when you get into an argument or when you get upset, when you get into a state, you feel it, right? Like your adrenaline starts kicking, cortisol starts going. I mean, when you get worked up, when you get heated, what do? Do you tend to want to talk more and engage and work it out and have long conversations about it? And 15 minutes to an hour to 2 hours, and you're still wanting to talk and talk and talk. Or when you get worked up and you get, in a state, when you get a little heated, do you shut down and move back? And
I can see me doing both. It just depends on what it is. Because sometimes, if you don't know what to say, sometimes you just need that time just to kind of process.
Abandonment people do not process. We need to talk.
Yeah, so you're engulfment.
Yeah.
But wait a minute. After I get it processed, I want to talk about it.
Okay,
but the fact that you have to process.
I'm not always like that though. It depends what it is. I mean, if it's something
when
if I don't really
get
understand.
worked up,
Okay.
what is your go-to? I want to talk about this right now to figure it out, or I need to think about it, I need to process it, and then I'll come back to you.
I think I want to process it.
Right?
When
It's
I
a
get- when I-
fundamental
when I get
difference,
mad.
right? Now, when you're not worked up, you'll talk, you'll engage, you'll do whatever. But that's, John, that's what I find with people, and thank you for that and your genuineness to do that even on the air, because people really struggle to understand, and here's a big piece that we also didn't get to talk a lot about, the internal process that you go through. That's what needs to be managed in marital relationships, not the I'm going to fix my partner. If my partner would do something different, would be better. It's an internal reality.
Yeah. It's interesting. I was thinking of my own experience with in my perfect life. So
Wow.
so,
I
but
wish I were the Pope.
No, I definitely not.
It's good to
But
be the Pope.
I'm abandonment, and I that has
Me
been
too.
a pattern all my life.
Right. Absolutely.
And my wife is more of the engulfment, and so she wants to figure this out, and so she'll come at, like, once we got into an argument, and I wanted to leave, and I got into the car and took off, and before I took off, she went to the car and put her hands down on the top of the hood and
Wow.
said, "You're going to talk to me, John Nelson." And I
So you're engulfment because you don't like being engulfed, right?
I
how
don't
it-
like being engulfed.
Right.
No.
So she's abandonment, you're engulfment.
Right.
So
she
yeah.
doesn't like to be right.
Right. And so
Yeah.
it's a really
Yeah,
weird term when you think that was one of those discussions.
It's
my wife
just
and I
the
had a bunch.
opposite,
Right.
but-
It is.
So
It
yeah,
is.
so I'm with you, John. I would do the same thing where like I would much rather lock myself into an office when we get into a fight or just go. I've been known to literally like just leave the house and go for a walk or ride my bike or something because I
Right.
just
And I'm like Joy. I'm going to put my hands on the car, I guess, and and like
She
I want to
stopped
talk.
me.
Yeah, man, we need to talk about it. We can't
No, we
be
don't.
apart and separate. And like I'm worked up, you're worked up. We got to fix this. Like you're going to
Right-
talk to me
right
now.
now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. That's an abandonment perspective. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you for Neil for that because I was kind of thinking the same thing. I'm like, wait a minute, John. Like, right? Yeah. That's Adam. That's the thing. When we get heated, when something's going on, not when you're calm. And like dating, abandonment people are able to like, oh, cool, call me whenever you want, talk to me, it's fine, we can talk later. That's because they're managing their emotional self. And the engulfment people are like, sure, we can have these long, lovely conversations and deal with all this emotion because they're internally managing themselves and bringing themselves to the point of being able to do that. But when it gets hot, when it gets heated, you're going to want to jump in the car and run away or stop the car and make the other person
I still
talk.
say it's not just cut and dry. I mean, because
Yeah.
a
A lot of people feel that way.
Well, I mean, I can think of like in past relationships when get really angry about something. Oh yeah, I'm ready to talk about it, but it's not going to be pretty.
Yeah, well,
And it probably would have been best if I just
Right.
walked away and let it, kind of stew down. But it just depends.
abandonment people, we got to talk about it now. All right, we got to move on though because
Yep.
of time. So you guys, I'm curious, Adam and Neil, it was the one that you thought was the most interesting. We talked a little bit about it on the front end, but it is, Neil, I agree with you, really important to understand the emotions on the day-to-day and what's really going on with what you experience and what the emotions are doing for you. What did you think? What did y'all think about that? Take it from there a little bit, Adam and Neil. I didn't set that up so great, did I? Can you imagine ways that emotions, in listening to that show, operate in your day-to-day? Like, do you think about it in those kind of terms?
Well, I mean,
Because therapists do, I can tell you.
Well, I mean, there's also times that I can say, and I'm sure everybody in this room can say, when you've been like your spouse or whatever, or girlfriend or whatever might say, well, why are you ill today? And you're like, I don't know. I'm just mad. I'm having a bad day.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I guess there's a cause for that, and you're trying to deal with something, but sometimes it's not so cut and dry. What's perturbing you?
Yeah,
So-
I think that's very important to address because I feel like there's a lot of people that like I think we talked about it, the triggers, when something happens, like something could happen where like someone could cut you off on the road and like Chris might not do anything, but Adam, it just really sets him off because possibly he had somewhere his dad was a bad driver and he got in an accident, like, and it's that kind of stuff. Like, why are you triggered? Why does this happen? And why are you reacting that way? And I think there's a lot of people that go with the excuses. This is just the way I am. Well,
That's a good point.
how did you get to this way, the way that you are? And I think
Right.
that's the part that people have to understand. Is like you react the way you react.
Excuse, yeah.
You react the way you react for a reason.
rationalization.
What's the reason behind this? And that's why I think people need to address, like, why does when my husband, bites his fingernails, it just drives me crazy outside of being nasty habit, or, why
Down to the quick.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think that's a great thing that people need to think about. It's like, why is this thing causing me so much turmoil, or even the other way? Like, why does this make me so happy? What about this gives me that dopamine fix? What about it really do I like? Because that helps you kind of understand, one, if you're in a relationship, explaining to them why this is good or this is bad, not just because I'm an emotional wreck, but here's why. But then also it's like you learn to manage it. We've talked about with those emotions. That's part of things, like you don't stop feeling emotions. You learn how to manage those emotions, and you have to understand the history behind it. So I thought it was great because more people need to understand that, because it's not just this is who I am.
Yeah, we talked about how they operate, what purpose they serve, like where do the emotions really come from, and how do they operate, which is. Gosh, with emotional intelligence, that's a term that people use nowadays. You're going to be on top of those processes. And I'll tell you, I think people really, really struggle with one of you, as you even just said, right? Like, how do I feel today? Like, I don't even know. People,
Yeah.
you know where they're at?
Yeah.
Happy, mad, glad, or sad. That's the level of their ability to identify, where they are at any given point. And I got to tell you, there's so much more that's going on. Like, we don't have time to get to it, but I was thinking about getting up and grabbing my handout that I forgot from the Adlerian conference, John, I was telling you about. The idea, you'll have to listen to the episode, whatever it was, 203, to understand Adlerian therapy as what we talked about, because the buddy, to Freud, who followed Freud up and gave us a lot of groundbreaking
Whom
understanding.
Freud excommunicated.
Ooh,
Yeah.
yes, he did, right? Like, yeah. There was a battle there.
Is the list the handout with emotions or
Yeah,
or
so
feeling words?
it was really cool, John, because at this conference, it was one of the cool things. Like, I never keep the handouts anymore. I just don't. But this was a handout that they used that listed all of the emotions, and instead of like the definition, and we read them on the show. I think Kasie picked one and Victoria picked one, and we used them as examples. But what it did is not define the emotion or help you understand what it is. It really helped you to lay out, like, what is this emotion moving you to?
Mm-hmm.
Like, anxiety is moving you to an action. Depression is moving you to insight about something in your life, and it goes on. It's too much to explain, but it's fascinating to see the way these emotions really evoke movement towards, in Adlerian theory, or in Adlerian perspective, really is a better word, the desired state. Mm-hmm. Like, emotions are serving a purpose. There's a reason why we have them, and we talked about how it communicates so much. And you were saying, maybe before the mics came on, I don't know when, Adam, but like a baby in the womb.
I used an example you used on this previous show that I actually liked.
It's literally communicating, and you're communicating without the symbols of words, and babies understand that stuff. It's tremendously important in our our human relationships. So, John, I quoted you on the show.
Oh, no.
If you remember, right? And so I was dying to get you on to be able to talk about it, and we haven't been able to land together a whole lot with what you talked about with the...
Wait a minute, give me a hint. I'm trying to remember what it was.
The manualized... So what was the
yeah.
quote that I did for you? Therapy has become so manualized.
Right.
And then you were going to give an Adlerian technique that was specific. Do you remember?
Oh.
Think about it for a second.
Okay.
And pull it back. Because I forgot, too, with the foundations of marriage, the segment. Where did we land? I know, it's so disjointed. But again, listening audience, we will get our routines together and we will get our crap with it right. Where did we land with the foundations of marriage? I call the golden egg that we emotionally want universally a close and emotionally safe, intimately close, emotionally safe space. Like, that's where we kind of landed with the foundations of theory as well. So sorry about that. I needed to throw that in. So you remember? Did you pull it back?
I'm trying to, but was that spitting in the soup?
The way I got
think it. No, this was a conversation, Adam, in the hallway. This
Yeah.
thing. I think it might have been.
But it was manualized, right? There's one that
No, we were talking about Adlerian
theory,
and
we talked about birth
and
order.
you said, "Oh, did they give you this technique and talk about the
Yeah, and that was spitting
in the soup?"
Right.
So, what is the Adlerian technique of spitting in the soup? I'm dying to know.
Well, I think part of that is that with Adler, sometimes you did get uncomfortable. It's not always feel good, and so
Oh, indeed.
yeah, if you're
In fact,
doing
mostly it is.
therapy, and you're really working at it, you're going to be discomforted.
Yeah.
You're going to be
Unregulated.
right, and so spitting in the soup is that you're going to spoil it so that you have to change a behavior, a future behavior that in other words, behavior that is causing you to mess up or not to have let's say it's interfering with your relationship or with a parent or a child or a spouse and or somebody at work, and so you've got to look at that and say, okay, I've got to examine this, even if it makes me feel uncomfortable. And so that's, in a sense, spitting
Okay,
in one's
so the
soup.
metaphor: who's spitting in the soup in the process? The therapist or the client, or both?
Well, I think it's both, and
Okay.
I've looked at it both ways. I've looked
Interesting.
at it from the idea that the therapist can bring it up and do this,
Yeah.
and use that as a technique himself. But also, it's an encouragement.
herself.
Herself, right.
Sorry,
Sorry.
just bust your chops.
Again, I'm old. So, and then
That
you
was
do
mean.
it. And then you do, but also the client will learn how to do that
Themselves.
themselves
'Cause that's what
and
I was-
become enabled.
Yeah.
And so, okay,
Yeah, that's
I'm
very
not going to
cool.
be satisfied with what I've got right now because it's not I could do so much more.
I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired, and I want a new way
I'm gonna change.
of operating.
I'm gonna
Yeah.
change.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting when you were talking about spitting in the soup and explaining.
Meaningful change that will stay.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. From a therapist's perspective, we would guide that process sometimes and, using the metaphor spit in the soup ourselves to purposely work with transference and different
Mm-hmm. Right.
things that we do, with the science. But what my brain went to is exactly what you were just explaining. So cool when the client, right? We figure this out together. I say that for so many reasons, and this is another one of them. Like when you're in a therapy relationship with me, I'm not a soothsayer. I'm not reading tea leaves. Like I don't know your life. I'm not an expert there. You are, and they can bring that and examine what are these emotions doing. I've thought about this. I've journaled this or whatever.
Is this helpful? It's
Right?
not.
And if it isn't, how do I spit in it, change it to affect a different, more accurately desired state? Right?
Well
That's the
said.
day-to-day of emotion.
Well said.
Yeah, it's cool stuff. Yeah, it really is cool
You're
stuff.
eloquent.
Well, I don't. I am no. The many would say I'm not. But thank you for those kind words. Yeah. What did I want to cover with this? Yeah, that was what I had for sure. It was interesting in that show, and I know we got to land here shortly. Kasie and I got into not a debate, but do you remember that, Neil? Like we got into a little bit of back and forth, and I think you even kind of thought like, "Oh, we're disagreeing or whatnot." I don't think we were when we were kind of talking about emotions lying to us. Do you remember that much?
Yeah, I think, because there is a balance, because your emotions are there for a purpose, but
Right.
they also aren't always accurate.
Right.
So it was really this kind of things that, like, emotions are important, but then they do lie to you. And so I think it was kind of weird because I think you were talking about emotions are important, and Kasie was like, yeah, but they lie.
Right.
And so it's kind of a weird, interesting conversation because emotions are something that are built into humans for survival. And
Literally.
And so but what you have to do is you have to say, okay, nowadays our survival techniques are a lot different. We don't have a lion hunting us, and we have to make sure that we're not going to get attacked. And it's a different world we live in now.
Absolutely than the primal experience of what we had. And it was funny because it was probably obvious. John, I was not eloquent in those moments because she kind of caught me in that. I say that all the time. Emotions also lie to us. But I was fresh off the Adlerian, looking at Alfred's process and Alfred Adler. And
you know him personally.
I don't know Alfred. Alfred and I are boys. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's dead, but
He's on next week.
he's on the guest host.
Seance.
But it was it felt like a difference, right? And so we don't go too long with it. But I want to ask you, John, directly. It's another reason why you were here for sure this week. They have a purpose. They are created. They communicate to us, and then they communicate to others, moving us, as we were just talking about, even spitting in the soup to change where they move us, to a desired state. But emotions also lie to us. I've said that many times, and I kind of fumbled because Kasie said what I said many times, and it felt like it didn't fully fit with Adler's, process. It feels like there's a disconnect there, and I wish I would have been thinking about that all weekend at that conference, and I wasn't. Do you see the divergence or the differential?
I would agree.
There?
Everything that you all have said about emotions, I agree with, but I also agree with the idea that they do lie,
right,
and all the time,
right.
So you've got to be able to be on alert to that. I would tell a story, but I mean, it was back when I was in seminary years ago, and when seminary did not turn out to be the place that very idealistic young men thought it would be, and because we were all supposed to love Jesus and all of that, and I remember that we had a Greek book. And it was really, really, really hard. And I put feel in big, bold letters on the Greek book.
Okay.
Because we were not feeling. We weren't allowed to feel. It was all supposed to be in the head and all of that. And I was kind of, I made a big thing about that. And that put me at odds with
the group.
With the group.
Oh,
right.
wow.
Yeah.
Right. That was the therapist in you totally popping out. Huh?
Yeah. And already at that
stage, yeah.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
So
I could see that. It is. So let's wind this down by saying, I think you're right. I mean, it works with both, and part of what we figure out together is which one of these things are lying to us, creating belief structures and perceptions that are not helpful, destructive, and not true, and which ones are really moving us to a direction towards, Adler's desired state, having that purpose, and the idea that biologically based conditions are also, when we talked about that a little bit on that episode, a part of what happens. Like the brain chemistry does its thing because of the genetic reality, just as because you were born is another factor. And I remember one of the instructors at the conference kind of said, there's all these things mixed up in the whole process. Like it's a big cooking pot, he had said. It's a big stew.
Oh,
right?
And so he spat in the soup.
Yeah, well, he didn't go there, John, but when you brought up that technique and whatnot, and as I'm saying
he called
this
it
now,
a big stew.
That's what he called it. You're right. That's probably where that came from. So, man, your experience with that is so awesome. That's neat stuff. So, where did we land when it comes to the emotions and the emotional day-to-day? We landed on understanding emotions, communicate to ourselves and then to others, and they create movement, which gets us to that desired state, the basic tenets of Adlerian stuff. But as you can see with our little interlude here, I mean, it is a complicated deal. It is a complicated process. So that is the boys' month in review. I tell you, it's going to be different, right? Yeah. Pretty cool.
I really enjoyed this because you were actually I learned quite a bit.
Isn't it crazy?
Yeah,
Seriously.
I did, because I said, well, maybe I thought I knew this, but I didn't necessarily.
I mean, this show, when we're talking about these things, understand when you present something, you're learning. When you talk about something, you're learning. And, that's what This is the human emotional experience. Al Endes was saying we endeavor to figure this thing out together. So thanks, guys, for hanging with us. Guys, we'll see you next week. We'll have the panel back, all of us, because I think that we have our schedules kind of arranged and figured out. So you will see Victoria, me, John, and Kasie bucking through a therapist's eyes. Take care. Have a good week.